council to order, and I would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Evans,
Present.
Councilmember Harris,
Here.
Councilmember Patterson, I think he's here.
He was here.
It's here twice.
Vice President Lightfoot,
Present, ma'am.
President Scott.
Here.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and we're meeting again remotely due to the governor's executive order in the COVID-19 situation. We have several pieces of legislation, the first one being introductory number 153, which is the approving the apportionment of taxes and charges. Any questions, comments, or concerns from members of the Finance Committee or the other members of council that are joining us? Hearing none.
For the record, I am here. I apologize. My phone got stuck.
Okay.
Also, I didn't hear my name, but I'm here.
You're not on the Finance Committee, so that's why you didn't hear your name.
Oh, right. Thanks.
But we are glad that you're here, Councilmember Lupien. Councilmember Patterson, was that a motion for introductory number 153?
Yes, it was moving.
Okay, it was
Second.
moved and it's been moved and seconded by Councilmember Harris. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. Thank you very much. Introductory number 153.
Madam Clerk, you do need to
I'm
read
sorry, Madam Clerk, if you
affirmative
can
vote
just
of
affirm.
5-0 into the record.
You're on mute.
Sorry. The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome.
Introductory number 154, authorizing a mandatory agreement relating to a cloud-based financial data management and reporting solution. Questions, comments, or concerns on introductory number 154?
Motion to adopt.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Harris. And seconded by-
Councilmember Evans, I believe there's an amendment on introductory number 154 to correct the fiscal year from 2019-20 to 2020-2021.
Yes,
Thank
there
you.
is.
May I have a motion on the amendment from 2019 to 2020? Councilmember Harris, you make that amendment?
Yeah, I move
Yes.
to adopt.
Okay, move for the amendment. Thank you, Councilmember
Second.
Harris. Seconded by Councilmember Patterson. All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, now we'll vote on the introductory number 154 as amended. Is there a motion?
Move it.
Second.
Been moved by Councilmember Patterson, seconded by Councilmember Harris. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. That passes. Madam Clerk.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Introductory number 155 is an authorizing a master licensing agreement with Greenlight Networks LLC. Questions, comments, or concerns?
I have a comment.
Yep. Councilmember Harris. Yep, I'll see you, Councilmember Gruber. Go ahead, Councilmember Harris.
I just want to comment on looking forward to the work that's being done with the green light. I want to make some notations that there are people in the 19th Ward who have lobbied to try to get this in our neighborhood and our district. So we're really looking forward to this moving forward so we can have choices for our residents. I'll be watching this. I'm very excited about this, and good job on the administration.
Thank you, Councilmember. Anyone else from Finance before Councilmember Gruber?
Patterson.
Okay,
just
Councilmember
wanna-
Gruber.
Patterson.
Okay, Councilmember Patterson, go ahead.
All right. I was just hoping that the administration could speak to the item. We had some serious concerns at the last agenda, well, at a couple of our last meetings about this in particular and specifically making this service accessible to folks in our more challenging communities. I just want to stress again, nobody's looking for a handout. We're looking for access. So nobody's asking for a discount, but we do want this service in the neighborhood because it is significantly better than what is currently available and what is offered by Spectrum.
Thank you, Councilmember Patterson. And I know that many of our residents have been concerned about making sure that there's access to this high-speed internet access into some of the more challenged neighborhoods. Part of this agreement with Greenlight is that they would commit and work with the city to identify neighborhoods that in those challenged areas that they should be going into, and that we would help them through our neighborhood service center get the easements to be able to actually install that fiber. As you know, an easement is a legal document that has to be notarized and all of that. And so it will be a process, but I know that Greenlight has not only assured the city, but I know that they themselves are committed to making sure that people that want access to this high-speed internet gets it. It will take some time, but we are going to work together to identify those neighborhoods that they can go into next. And I know that there are many people that are in the 14619 area code, Councilmember Harris, that have reached out wanting the service, and they're committed to doing that. They will first go into neighborhoods where they have the easements to actually do the installation, and then we will work with them as soon as we're able to open up to identify those neighborhoods where we need to do some door knocking to get easements to get access to people's property so that they can lay the fiber. And we'll work with council to identify some of those neighborhoods. I know people that have reached out in 14621, 14605, 14609, mainly in the Northeast section. And so we're going to work with our DES team as well as our MBD team to identify the smaller blocks and get some installation of this fiber. The one good thing that Greenlight has agreed to do is where we are doing road construction, to go in early and lay that fiber connection and get that access. So we know in a coming year we have East Main Street that is going to be done. We're looking at next year doing North Goodman. And I believe that there are some other streets in Northeast Rochester that are going to be done this year, and they will lay that fiber while they're in the ground, and will help them get access to the easements that they need in order to get that from the street to the house.
Thank you.
Sounds great. And so there's some, just follow-up question, there's some need for getting this done now, part of it being the construction season, the other part of it being there's some more comprehensive work that needs to happen now. That's why this kind of needs to happen now.
It goes with our dig once policy, that we want as many people to go into many businesses, not just Greenlight, but across the board, whether we're talking about RG&E, Spectrum, Frontier, anybody that is looking to do work in our roadway, in our right of way. We want them to do that while we are currently doing the construction on the street. It completely disrupts the makeup of a road to have people cut into the road after we have actually installed a new infrastructure there. And so with the master license agreement, that gives them the ability and us the ability to count on them to actually go in and do their installation of their fiber. And because construction is starting up, especially road construction, and we have a limited time frame to get a lot of the road construction done. Right now, we are on Mount Hope Avenue. We're finishing up some work on Scio Street. We want to make sure that every entity that we can have a master license agreement will be going into those roads and doing those installations now. The other part is that the faster that we can get them to get the easements, to take care of the areas where they have already committed to taking care of, where they have the easements, get those done, then we can move on to other areas. We do know that it's, of course, a challenge to install fiber across a large network, and they're not just working in the city of Rochester, they're working in all of upstate New York, and I believe some other areas. So we want to be open for business, and we want them to know that we value the partnership, but we know that many of our neighbors and our citizens would like access to this service. And this is a way for us to give them that access that they need in order to get the high-speed internet access.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Gruber, you have a question?
I do, and thank you. I see that Commissioner Jones and his team, I see Anthony and Louis have entered the call as well, and I want to commend them on the great work they're doing in streamlining all the work with the different telecommunications companies. We had a very, very spirited conversation about this in council the other day, and when I look at the answers that were provided to us, I think I can kind of distill what some of the real concern was in a more specific way. And I'd like to use the exact language that came, I believe, probably from Greenlight as really to highlight what I think we want to work on as a council. So Councilmember Harris asked, what areas of the community have received the service and which areas are next? And the answer is customer demand will determine how we prioritize network construction. And I think that's totally valid. That makes sense. They're a business, they're a private business. They can do that if that's what they like. This is not municipal broadband, they're a private business. But then when I ask the question of what the criteria is to get them to open up in a new neighborhood, it becomes very vague. They say, once we see a concentration of signups, they say, once we see a significant number of signups, but in no place does it give us any type of real guidance as to what critical, what the actual number is that gets them to begin to pay attention to a neighborhood. And I'll tell you, I live, as all of you know, I live in a neighborhood that's really consists of 2 streets, right? Madison and King is the entirety of the Susan B. Anthony neighborhood. If it's based on concentration or significance of numbers, we'll never get them to come to our neighborhood. So I really like to use this opportunity. I'm in full support of the legislation. I'd like to use the opportunity to ask Greenlight to sharpen their pencil a little bit and to help us understand how we can get them how we can get the numbers in a neighborhood to get them to pay attention. Because I can't even get Greenlight to answer a phone call in the Susan B. Anthony neighborhood, and there's no guidance based on the answers they provided to us themselves.
That's something that we will definitely talk to them about, and we'll have them get back to you on that.
Anybody else? I just want to thank the administration, particularly the DES department, for working with Greenlight on this, and Greenlight being amenable to working with the city to expanding this access. When I chaired Parks and Public Works, Commissioner Jones, you remember this, I remember meeting with Greenlight, I think it was 2018, because we were hearing from so many people who wanted the service expanded in the city. I think also broadly that it's just not Greenlight that we want to see in terms of faster internet services, that we have to hold others accountable too, and not only Greenlight when we talk about speedier services. It has to be more than just one internet provider that can do that. And then once you get that competition, then we'll see more of that. So I think it just goes beyond Greenlight. They're only one piece of the overall puzzle. So I think it's important to note that. And the other thing I wanted to note is that, and the administration can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Greenlight has started to be a good partner. You know, we have this telecommunications policy, and some folks give us a hard time about it, and I don't think Greenlight has. So it shows that they are interested in being partners with the city long-term, and this is a good first step. So I just want to say that. Anything else on this? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Move it.
Been moved, there a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it, passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Thank you. Introductory number 156 is a resolution endorsing Five Star Bank's application to establish a banking development district. We did have a work session on this topic. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
I have comments.
Yep, Councilmember Harris.
I'm looking forward to see how this develops. As many of you may know, the 19th Ward, we've lost some key banking, especially the one that's located on Thurston and Chili. Recent loss to our neighborhood. We were not able to secure banking at the Staybridge Suites or the Staybridge Brooks Landing development location. So, you know, banking is of concern for those who live in the South District. So I'm just want the administration to keep their eyes on thinking opportunities that can bring those services closer to our neighbors. And looking forward to see how this develops, and I do support this legislation.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. Anyone else?
I had the
President Scott?
question. Thank you. The question I had submitted, the answer didn't clarify it for me, but my question was the 14 loans that were cited during the work session. I wanted to know, how did that look in relation to what would normally be expected? I mean, was it good? Was it not so good? And the answer that I got was to tell me that they were loans that were made within the boundaries of the business development district, and that a lot of loans were made throughout. So I still don't know what 14 looks like compared to what.
Mm.
Well, I can tell you that in another challenged neighborhood, we had a bank, I won't say the bank's name, but they were in that what we consider to be a challenged area that would be eligible for a BDD, and they had 0 loans, 0 mortgages, 0 investment in that particular community. The reason why developing these BDDs are important, and we hope to do it with more banks, and I believe that there is either legislation or new legislation that would allow for credit unions to also become a bank and development district, is because in many of our challenged neighborhoods, these banks do 0 loans. One of the reasons why even the CARES Act right now, one of the challenges is that the dollars went to banks. So those businesses that were unbankable or cash businesses were not able to access those dollars to help them actually get over. And that's something that I know that the federal government is looking at this time. But many of these larger banks do not pay attention to challenged neighborhoods and challenged areas. So when it compares to 14 being in this area right now, that's better than we've had in the past. And we would expect for them to do a lot more investment in those neighborhoods as it pertains to mortgages and lending if this was to go forward.
Thank you.
Anything else on introductory number 156, the Banking Development District?
Yeah, I had just had a quick question.
Yes, council member.
If you could just refresh my memory here in terms of the timing on this. So it says if successful in their application, remind me what the timing on that actually is in terms of that approval. And then the other question I have is if anytime soon, then what the plan is for outreach based on the current conditions that we're dealing with right now, if we are going to try to assist folks in the community with loans. So if you could just kind of refresh my memory really quick on the timing of all of this, that would be great.
So I will answer part of that, and then I'll turn it over to Brad. And once City Council approves it, it has to go to the state for the state to then approve it. The last time we did this, the state did not approve the application, and therefore, even though they did not approve the application, First Five Star Bank continued to do banking in those most challenged areas. As it pertains to how long, I do not know. Given the COVID situation, I'm not sure that that things will be moving along as quickly as they might had this situation not be before, this pandemic not be before us. But in the meantime, we will continue to work with not only our banks, but also with our neighborhood and business development team. And as you know, we have a lot of different items this year. I'm sorry, that's my dog. Go ahead, Brad, finish this up.
That's okay. Yeah, I think just echoing what the mayor said, I think we don't really know what the timeline will be on approval from the state at this point. And that's something we'll be following up with them once this gets submitted. But what I can say is that moving forward, if this application is approved and Five Star is given the extra funding, that gives them more of a backstop and additional resources that they can use to make those loans. So, and this kind of answers your question as well, President Scott. It makes it much more simple and easier for them to make these loans in the neighborhoods. And they really want to have a conversation with us and with other community groups about how to go about doing that outreach. So I think they're ready to go. They're ready to start doing it immediately. They're already doing it, and we'll be working with them every step of the way to make sure that they're doing the outreach the right way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it's not the city that's the ultimate approver, it's the Department of Financial Services at the state. But we have to show support for it. Any other, anything else on 156? I'll entertain a motion, please.
Move it.
It's been moved by Councilmember Patterson, seconded by Councilmember Harris. All those in favor?
Aye.
I vote aye. Passes unanimously. Madam Clerk.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Introductory number 157 is a continuation of the local improvement ordinance number 1289 relating to the Monroe Avenue, Oxford Square commercial parking lot. There is a public hearing to be held at 5 o'clock after the committee meeting. Questions, comments, or concerns on 157?
Move it.
It's
Second.
been moved. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Madam Clerk.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Introductory number 158 is a continuation of the local improvement ordinance numbered 1258 relating to the North Street commercial parking lot. And this will also have a public hearing at the conclusion of committees at 5 o'clock after committees. Questions, comments, or concerns on 158?
Move it.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Harris. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Madam Clerk.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Introductory number 159 is also a local improvement ordinance, but it's establishing the operating and maintenance cost of neighborhood, commercial, and residential parking areas. And this will also have a public hearing at the conclusion of committees. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns on 159?
Move it.
No, second.
And moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. That passes unanimously. Madam Clerk.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Introductory number 160, amending the city policy related to pre-employment drug testing. Questions, comments, or concerns?
Okay.
I got some thunder and lightning when we said that.
You all right, Madam President?
That was thunder. It was like, oh my God.
You look a little shook. You look a little shook. You all right?
Let's go out of here.
Our whole house shook.
It
cracked.
You know, growing up, how your grandparents was like, turn off everything, turn off.
Mirrors.
You was about to shut the whole meeting down.
You got to turn off
Continue this
everything.
meeting. I was getting ready to continue the meeting with like Morris code or something. Or the electricity. No, I'm kidding.
Hey.
Any questions, comments, or concerns with the pre-employment drug testing?
Madam President.
I noticed it's something that has been supported by council as well as the administration. So Madam President, I don't know if you wanted to make any comments as well as Mayor Warren, because I know that you have both submitted this legislation this cycle.
Yes, I heartily approved. We've pushed for this for a while, and it was a long time coming, and I'm looking forward to it having an impact. That while the numbers of people who've been rejected based on failing the drug test for marijuana is small, it doesn't speak to the number who never applied for fear of being rejected. So I certainly look forward to this, and I appreciate the work of the administration in pushing this forward as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice President, you were trying to say something?
You were trying to say something?
No, I just didn't want you to miss your opportunity here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to commend the administration, turn this around in a quick period of time, and this is a really good thing we're doing.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Malik, I got a question.
Yeah, Councilmember Peel.
So it says pre-employment, so that doesn't deter us from still testing while they're employed? So if there's like do we do randomized testing during someone's employment? And could at that point someone be fired because of that? Because it only says pre-employment.
There are, I don't know, Tassie, if you want to go ahead, but there are positions that that are still, you are still required to that we will still test for. So for example, if you're in the police department, fire department, or you drive one of our DES trucks, CDL, have a CDL license, those individuals, if they got into a car accident or something, or there was a suspected of drug use, they would still be required, and that is by state law. So we could not test them either for pre-employment or during their employment. So individuals that are working that do not fit within that that category, they will not be tested for marijuana, but they could be tested for other illegal drugs if there was suspected that it was impacting their ability to do their job.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd just like to also express how excited I am that this is happening, and just highlight the community that, you know, they did push for this, and this is a really good example of, you know, when the community can work in partnership with City Council and the administration to get something passed. So this is incredible, and I think it's going to have a great impact.
Anybody else? All right, may I have a motion?
Move it.
Been
Second.
moved. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Ayes have it. Madam Clerk.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Introductory number 161 is authorizing a master license agreement with Crown Castle Fiber LLC. Questions, comments, concerns?
Move it.
I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Madam Clerk.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Introductory number 176 is amending the budget and authorizing an agreement for provision of public access television. I'll entertain a motion.
Move it.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments before we call for the vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. That passes. Madam Clerk.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Thank you. And is
You're
there any
welcome.
other business? Is there any other business to come before the Finance Committee? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
At this time, I call the Neighborhood and Business Development Committee to order and I ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Patterson,
Here.
Councilmember Lupian,
Here.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Here.
Vice President Lightfoot,
Present, ma'am.
President Scott.
Here.
All right. Let the record also reflect that we're joined by all the other members of council. Introductory number 162, authorizing the sale of real estate. Questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, I need a motion and a second.
So
Move
moved.
it.
Second.
Okay, so we got a motion by Councilmember Ortiz, seconded by Councilmember Lupian. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item passes unanimously.
The
Madam Clerk?
clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Okay. Introductory number 177, amending the Consolidated Community Development Plan 2019-20 Annual Action Plan to fund and implement programs to prevent, prepare for, and respond to difficulties arising from the coronavirus pandemic. Public hearing to be held at 5 p.m. after the May 7th, 2020 committee meetings. Questions, comments, or concerns? Dear colleagues? No questions, no comments, no
question.
concerns? Who?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Councilmember Lupian.
I guess this is in general, you know, I saw one of the comments from the library and wondering, if there's any opportunity in, I guess it would probably be most appropriate in introductory 186, but if there's any way to support their ongoing efforts to, they've given mobile hotspots and they provide small business help to support them in that.
So, I can speak a little bit to that. I don't know if the mayor wants to add, or Commissioner Lyman Torres is more familiar even than I am, I think, on that subject. But they have been distributing them. I think that's part of the whole digital divide effort. We wanted to get computers out first with the digital divide, but we can assess that as we move along and as more funding comes in. If that is a deficiency, we can certainly, try to cover that gap.
Thank you.
I would also add that there were some additional funding streams that are being pursued for that with the library as well.
It's great to hear. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns on this item? Seeing none, I need a motion in a second.
So
Move
moved.
it.
Second.
Okay, motion by President Scott, seconded by?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Ortiz. All right, so let's vote. All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? Nobody's opposed. Item passes unanimously.
Clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Okay. Introductory number 178, appropriating community development block grant, coronavirus funds to business emergency response grant and business fund establishment grant programs. Questions, comments, or concerns on this item? Seeing none, I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
All right, motion by Councilmember Lupi and seconded by Councilmember Ortiz. All in favor of the item? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All opposed to the item? Seeing none, item passes unanimously.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Introductory number 179, appropriating community development block grant coronavirus fund for the emergency assistance repair program. Questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, I need a motion in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Lupian, second by Councilmember Ortiz. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? No members opposed. Item passes unanimously.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Okay, introductory number 180, appropriating community development block grant coronavirus funds for a landlord rehabilitation grant program. Question, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, I need a motion in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Lupian, seconded by Councilmember Ortiz. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item passes unanimously. Introductory number 181.
Excuse me, Councilmember Paxton.
Sorry, I got a roll going.
It's okay. The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Introductory number 181, appropriating community development block grant coronavirus funds and authorizing a mandatory agreement for landlord-tenant eviction prevention services. Questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, I need a motion and second.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Ortiz, seconded by Councilmember Lupian. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Not opposed by anyone. Item passes unanimously.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Introductory number 182, appropriating community development block grant coronavirus funds and authorizing mandatory agreements for foreclosure prevention. Questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, I need a motion in a second.
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Councilmember Ortiz, seconded by Councilmember Lupian. All in favor?
Aye.
Item passes. Oh, whip. All opposed? Okay, item passes unanimously.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Introductory number 183, appropriating CARES Act coronavirus relief funds and authorizing mandatory agreements for the Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS program. Questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, I need a motion in a second.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Ortiz, seconded by Councilmember
Second.
Lupian. All in favor of the item? Aye.
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 All opposed to the item? None. Item passes unanimously.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Introductory number 184, appropriating community development block grants, coronavirus funds, and authorizing an agreement for an aging in place home foods distribution program. Questions, comments, or concerns? No questions, comments, or concerns. Need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Ortiz, seconded by Councilmember Lupian. All in favor of the item? Aye.
Aye.
I need to hear somebody else say
Aye.
aye. Okay. All opposed to the item? Nobody's opposed. Item passes unanimously.
Clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
All right, introductory number 185, appropriating CARES Act coronavirus relief funds and authorizing agreements for services for the homeless and those at risk of homelessness. Questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Ortiz, seconded by Councilmember
Second.
Lupian. All right, all in favor of the item?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed to the item? No one's opposed to the item. Item passes unanimously.
Clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Okay, introductory number 186, appropriating community development block grants, coronavirus funds, and authorizing an agreement related to the bridging the digital divide for the city school students. We need to amend this item. So I need a motion to amend, correcting the names of the organization from United Way of Greater Rochester, Inc. to United Way Services Corporation. So do I have a motion and a second to amend the item?
So moved.
Moved.
Moved by
Second.
Councilmember Ortiz, seconded by Council President Scott. All right, so now let's vote on the amendment. All in favor of amending the item?
Aye.
All opposed to amending the item? Seeing none, the amendment passes unanimously. Now, let's vote on the item as amended. I need a motion and a second for the item as amended.
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Councilmember Ortiz, seconded by Councilmember Lupian. All in favor of the item as amended? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed to the item as amended? None. The item passes unanimously.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
If there's no other business to come before this committee, we are adjourned.
Okay, this is Councilmember Gruber, and I'm going to call the Parks and Public Works Committee to order. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Councilmember Gruber,
Here.
Councilmember Evans,
Present.
Councilmember Pio,
Here.
Vice President Lightfoot,
Present, ma'am.
President Scott.
Here.
We're also joined today by a special guest from Mayor Warren. This is sadly, maternity leave in this country isn't very good, so I'm a single dad for the day. So if there's a crying baby, I have 20 minutes until I should be able to hand him off. So I apologize in advance.
Where's Levi? I don't see him.
He's got him right there. Don't you?
Oh, hi, Levi.
Oh, cute.
Oh, he's in the Moby.
I'm sure I just woke him up, so I hope the crying isn't too bad. Let me start off with introduction number 163, which we have to amend. So I'm going to ask for a motion to amend introductory number 163, authorizing an agreement to design resiliency and economic development initiative projects along the Genesee River. And we need to extend the agreement to 6 months after completion of the bidding phase. Can I have a motion for the amendment?
Move it.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so now let's go back and vote on the motion as amended.
Madam Clerk, you need to enter that vote into the record.
Oh, sorry about that.
Each amendment is separate too? Okay. The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Okay, so we're going to vote on introductory number 163 as amended, authorizing an agreement to design resiliency and economic development initiative projects along the Genesee River. Do I have any questions, comments, or concerns from council? If not, I'll take a motion.
Move it.
It's been moved
Second.
and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes.
Clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Wonderful. We are now at introductory number 164, authorizing an amendatory agreement relating to the Rock City Skate Park. Before I open up for questions, comments, or concerns, I just want to say personally, I see both Commissioner Jones and Commissioner Lyman Torres on here, and of course, Mayor Warren. This has been a long time coming. I think I've said it a million times. I remember the first time I was legally in a bar, I was at a fundraiser for the Rock City Skate Park. I mean, this thing has been going on for so many years now, and I believe this is truly going to be the last introductory that we need for the entirety of phase one. Hopefully there's more to come long term, but even phase one will be a tremendous skate park. So I just want to give kudos. I know it's been a long time coming. Commissioner Jones, Commissioner Lyman Torres, kudos to you all for your work. And I just want to open up if any other council members have questions, comments, or concerns.
Yeah.
If not, I'll take a motion.
Move it.
It's been moved
Second.
and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Introductory number 165, a bond ordinance.
Councilmember Gruber? The
Sorry
clerk
about
will enter
that.
the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Thanks for keeping me on my toes. Moving back to introductory number 165, a bond ordinance of the city of Rochester, New York, authorizing the issuance of $412,000 bonds of said city to finance the Rock City Skate Park. Any questions, comments, or concerns? If not, I'll take a motion.
Move it.
It's been moved
Second.
and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion
The
passes.
clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Introductory number 166, a bond ordinance to the city of Rochester, New York, authorizing the issuance of $1,342,000 bonds of said city to finance the Sager Drive Improvement Project. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
Move it.
It's been moved
Second.
and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 4-1 into the record. Was that Councilmember Evans that said no?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I believe Councilmember Evans had said aye. He was just a little bit delayed. So I think.
Oh, you said aye?
It was a 5-0 vote.
Oh, 5-0. Yeah, I said aye. Oh, aye.
Okay, sorry.
Aye.
Introductory number 167, a bond ordinance of the city of Rochester, New York, authorizing the issuance of $287,000 bonds of said city to finance water line and water service improvements associated with the Sager Drive Improvement Project. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
Move it.
It's been moved
Second.
and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
And finally, introductory number 168, authorizing an agreement for the Sager Drive Improvement Project. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
Comment, we'll have to send a note to former Councilwoman Elaine Spall and let her know this thing is finally gonna get done.
Finally.
I'll take a motion, please.
Move it.
Move it.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
If there's no other business before the Parks and Public Works Committee, I just want to commend DES again on their great work during the pandemic, continuing to serve the need. And I will call the committee to a close. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to call the Public Safety, Youth and Recreation Committee to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Vice President Lightfoot,
Present.
Councilmember Gruber,
Here.
Councilmember Harris,
Here.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Here.
President Scott.
Here.
Let the record reflect that we are also joined by other members of our council as well as our esteemed Mayor, Mayor Warren. Introductory number 169, appropriating funds for the use of Gray Key technology. Any questions, comments, and/or concerns?
Vice President Lightfoot, I had asked the question.
Councilperson Lupien.
Hello. I had asked the question if we can get the information around the circumstances where this would be used.
Yeah, I believe we have Deputy Chief Simmons on the line. If you could answer that question, sir.
Absolutely. So this situation or this technology would be used in the event that we arrest someone who is suspected of a violent crime, and we have probable cause to believe that there is some value in evidence that's located on the phone. We could reach out to a judge, apply for a warrant showing our probable cause, at which time after legal review, the judge can approve the warrant, which would give us the opportunity to unlock the iPhone, whether or not the suspected criminal allows us to or not.
Okay, so it's specifically for violent crimes, not necessarily drug crimes?
It could be drug crimes as well, because as we know, a lot of drug crimes ultimately lead to violent incidents.
Okay, so it's just limited to violent crimes and drug suspicion?
It's not necessarily limited. It's really limited to felony crimes. So
Okay.
most felony crimes are violent crimes, with the exception of a few like drugs or burglaries. But for the most part, it's going to be used from our major crimes unit, who deals with serious assaults and homicides.
Thank you. I'm just trying to get at if, someone could be stopped and, marijuana is found on them, could this be used to search their phones?
No, this wouldn't be used for a street stop situation. Again, we would have to go through a legal review, working with the DA's office and getting it approved through a judge. So this is more so a long-term felony case is when this technology will be used.
Thank you very much.
Great. Any other questions, comments, or concerns for introductory number 169? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adopt.
I'm sorry, who do we have?
Councilman Peel, sorry.
All right, Councilman Peel, go ahead.
The one-year license, is that unlimited usage, or is it you still have to pay per usage as well? So will more funds possibly be needed in the future if it is a per use charge?
Yeah, so the 1 year is for unlimited, but it's an annual fee. So in the future, per annual, more funds will be needed.
Okay, thank you.
It's my understanding too, Deputy Chief Simmons, that there's only one of these machines in our county, correct? So this would be the second one.
You are correct, Councilman. The Monroe County Sheriff's Department does have this machine, and they allow all the county towns and the city to use it. But as you can imagine, there becomes quite a waiting list. So we don't want any crime and to go to the wayside because we were waiting for the use of the machine.
Deputy Chief, will we also be as compassionate as them and letting others share our equipment as well?
Correct. As long as they have the proper court documents, a signed warrant by a judge, we would allow it.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns about introductory number 169 from any of my colleagues here? If not, I entertain a
Move
motion.
to adopt.
Moved by Councilperson Harris. I need a second.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Gruber. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, any nays? All right, motion passes. Introductory number 170, appropriate
me, Vice
funds.
President
Oh, I'm
Lightfoot.
sorry, Madam
That's
Clerk,
okay.
Madam Clerk, yeah.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome.
Introductory number 170, appropriating funds and amending the 2019-20 budget for the operations of the Greater Rochester Area Narcotics Enforcement Team Program. Any questions, comments, and/or concerns? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Moved by Councilman Gruber, second by Councilman Harris. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, introductory number 170 passes. Introductory number 170.
I'm sorry, the clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome.
Introductory number 171, authorizing the intermunicipal agreement with the Monroe County Crime Lab. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
So moved.
None, I entertain them. Moved by Councilman, who is that? Councilman Gruber, second by Councilperson Harris. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Introductory passes. Go ahead.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
All right, I'm a little off today, I'm sorry. Introductory number 172, authorized grant agreement with the County of Monroe for the Tobacco Sales Compliant Grant Program. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Councilperson Gruber, second by Councilman Harris. All in favor? Aye. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, introductory passes.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome, sir.
Introductory number 173, authorizing an agreement for the city's Connecting Children to Nature initiative. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
Let's move it.
Moved by Councilperson Gruber, second by Councilwoman Harris. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, introductory passes.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome.
Introductory number 174, appropriating funds and authorizing agreements for the Sexual Risk Education Grant Program. Any questions, comments, and or concerns?
Oh, I did have a,
Madam President.
yes, there was a, Councilmember Harris, I think you asked whether or not this was the first year,
Yes.
but the response was yes, but then it went on to talk about prior year's performance. I'm not clear on that response.
Commissioner Torres?
Yes, so I think the question was interpreted, is this the first time we've received the grant? This is the first time we've received the grant, where this is the second year of the grant that we would be entering. So we provided the data on how the first year of the grant performed.
So the grant period was, we were operating the grant, but we hadn't received the money. Is that the idea?
We did receive some funds for the first year, and this is to appropriate the funds for this upcoming year.
Okay. All right, thanks.
You sure, Madam President? You look like you got a part two today.
That's all right.
Thank you, Commissioner Torres. So did we have somebody move that one?
I'll move it.
All right, moved by
Second.
Councilman Gruber, second by who?
Jackie Ortiz.
Oh, second by
sorry.
Councilperson Ortiz. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Introduction on 174 passes. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-0 into the record.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome.
Introduction number I'm sorry.
I think that I just want to clarify something for the council president, and I think I just read the question. This grant used to be provided by the federal government, and they decided to discontinue and only fund abstinence programs. And so I believe that the state decided to take this on, and that's why it's the first state program, 5-year grant program, but we have provided this service before, but it was a federal program.
Madam President, is that a little more palatable for you?
Makes a little more sense. Yes, thank you. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that clarification, Mayor. Introduction number 175, authorize an intermunicipal agreement with the school district for traffic and crowd control services. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Councilperson Gruber.
Yeah, it's really, I appreciate the way my question was answered. I guess I'm mostly just kind of, this is more just a statement that I think there's going to be a lot of things that we assume are going to happen as usual, that because of the kind of long-term lingering effects of COVID are going to be different. And I think that this is going to be one of them. There's not going to be the same traffic and crowd control services. I credit the administration for doing the best they can to be forward thinking for next year. But I think it's almost inevitable that some of these things are going to need to be amended as we go because of COVID. And I would love for there to just be some regular understanding from council of what has to change over time.
Does anybody
Okay,
want to?
as I think that I understand what Councilmember Gruber is asking us is that we start to develop and look at plans for ongoing effects of the coronavirus and how we deal with people and the services that we provide, and keep council up to date on that. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Warren. I'm even referring specifically to specific contracts like this, where the $50,000 that we're approving here, we may find that there needs to be, this is what I was getting in the question, we may find we need to spend 5 times as much of that because we need to really do a lot of work around crowd control, or we might need to spend less because the governor doesn't even allow for maximum capacity of places. And I think there's going to be things that really do change and flex over time. And to understand what contracts are going to be impacted like that over the course of the year, it'd be nice to find some way to just have that be reported back. President Scott's looking like I'm not making sense. So
No, you're making sense, but I'm just trying to fit it within the context of the way that we do business generally. So do we, in cases where contracts are amended, they've got to come back to us anyway, right? So is this an additional step or just putting the amendment in language that relates it back to COVID?
True. I want to be clear. I'm not formally asking at this point for any additional step. It's more that this is the type of thing I think we're passing in May, and that we truly have no idea how it's going to play out when the school year starts next year. And it's our responsibility as in government to do that, to have a little bit of foresight. I just want to propose that we know some things are going to look different, and that I think if it's just the regular process as usual by amending the contract, so be it. I'm just nervous that it's going to be even more and greater than ever before because of the impacts of COVID this year.
We will definitely track the cost of different items like this for crowd control or even overtime or things like that may come up. So we will track that. And as the council president said, if we have to amend, or I can assure you that the budget director, once they start to see that one line is going up and we don't have the funds to cover it, we will be back to council to either adjust that, amend that, or we will, talk to the city school district about changing the contract. So I think that what you're saying is that we just need to make sure that we're keeping an eye on things like these, contracts like these, so that we don't have overruns and we're ahead of it instead of behind it.
Exactly. And I have full confidence in the budget director to do that. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, I'm hopeful. I'm always optimistic with the glass half full. I hope that we see the line going down and not up, hopefully. Any other questions, comments, and/or concerns by my colleagues on introductory 175 about authorizing an intermunicipal agreement with the school district for traffic and crowd control services? If not, I'll entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Moved by Council Member Gruber. I need a second.
Second.
Second by Councilperson Ortiz. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I got, okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
One abstention, Lachey.
All right, so we was moved by Councilmember Gruber. It was second by Councilperson Ortiz. It was abstained by Councilperson Lachey Harris. Madam Clerk?
Clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 4 01 into the record with Councilmember Harris abstaining.
All right, if there's no other business, well, before I move on, I just want to, is Deputy Chief Mark Simmons, while you're here, sir, and while we're having this conversation, just quickly want to, first of all, we can't thank you guys enough, you essential workers that are out there doing your work every day. And from my understanding, I know our last meeting, we didn't have anybody on the police department that was positive for COVID. And so I'm asking you this question again, because time has gone forward. And so we want to know and do an update and check on our officers. How are you guys doing out there? And are there any confirmed cases of COVID with any of our officers, sir?
Yep. And thank you, Councilman Lightfoot, for your concern. And yes, I'm happy to report as of today, there are still no positive confirmations with any of our officers, though it has touched our family members. And when that does, we are making sure that our officers are quarantined and taking the proper precautions. But we are very proud and very happy to say no person has been positive for COVID.
Well, we just want to extend our prayers to those families, of course. We want you to let them know that we support you guys 100%. And I also just want to commend you on the way you've been handling, all of the police officers have been handling the congregation that have been going on, in our community. We've been hearing a lot about that. There's been a lot of concern about people congregating in front of the stores, congregating at vigils, and you guys have been very respectful on how you've been dispersing individuals, how you've been educating our community. And I just really want to thank you. I haven't heard of any uprisings between the community and/or the police, which I think is very good. It speaks to how our officers have been handling. We hear cases that are happening all over the country, but I'm grateful, I'm glad, knocking on wood, that we haven't had any of those situations happening in Rochester. So I just want to thank you guys for the great work that you're doing. And if there's no other business to come before the public, say, oh, I'm sorry, Madam Mayor.
Yes, I just wanted to make a note. I know that this committee also is in charge of the Department of Youth and Recreation Services. We did have an employee that was in Youth and Recreation Services that was in ICU and on a ventilator. We are proud to report, and I know that the commissioner is very happy that he is out of ICU. He is off the ventilator, doing well, and also COVID-free. So we're thanking God that he was able to put through for himself and his family. So continue to keep them in your prayers, but excited that he was definitely able to pull through this.
Well, thank you for that update, Mayor. And thank you for also reminding me, oftentimes we focus on police and fire and we leave out the most important, really, which is DRICE, which is our Department of Youth and Recreation. I want to thank Commissioner Torres and her team too, because you guys have been feeding a lot of people. You have been taking care of our youth. You have been supporting our families. You've been passing out masks. You've been doing all kind of amazing things consistently throughout this COVID pandemic. Never stopping, as well as, dealing with some of the cuts and you guys have been maneuvering around all of that. And I just want to say my hats off to you, Commissioner Torres, and your team for the work that you've also been doing during these unprecedented times, especially dealing with our youth. I was on the Zoom call that was given for our youth, and I was very encouraged by our young people. And I just wanted to take some time out as well to acknowledge you and your team and the work that you guys have been doing. Okay. You want to respond? Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right. So if there's no other business coming for the Public Safety, Youth and Recreation Committee, we are adjourned.
Madam President, we can begin public hearings whenever you would like.
Thank you. I would like to call to order the public hearing for this month's meeting. Meeting will come to order and the clerk will call the roll, please.
Councilmember Evans.
Present.
Councilmember Gruber.
Here.
Councilmember Harris.
Here.
Councilmember Lupian.
Here.
Councilmember Ortiz.
Here.
Councilmember Patterson.
Here.
Councilmember Pio.
Here.
Vice President Lightfoot.
Present, ma'am.
President Scott.
Here. Before we begin the public hearing, I just want to go over briefly the process that we're operating under given our current circumstances. As usual, the city clerk's office sent public notices to the homes of individuals as required for each of the public hearings. That's probably where the similarity ends, because after that, we're doing things a little bit differently. These notices offer new methods to provide feedback for these public hearings. Specifically, individuals are given the option to email or mail in comments to be read live into the record by council staff. This notice was also posted in the newspaper, on the City of Rochester's website, and linked on social media. The same rules apply for individuals sending in comments as they would for in-person hearings. For each comment submitted, we will only be able to read the first 3 minutes. In addition, there was a public comment period for introductory number 177 for the city's plan to fund and implement programs to prevent, prepare for, and respond to difficulties arising out of the coronavirus pandemic. Those comments have been shared and will be read at this meeting as well. I now ask the clerk to begin the hearings.
Pursuant to law, public hearing will now be had on the following matter. Continuation of local improvement ordinance number 1289 relating to the Monroe Avenue, Oxford Square commercial parking lot, introductory number 157. Any persons desiring to speak in reference to said matter will now be heard.
There were no speakers that sent in comments for that item.
If there are no speakers, that hearing is closed.
Pursuant to law, public hearing will now be had on the following matter. Continuation of local improvement ordinance number 1258 relating to the North Street commercial parking lot, introductory number 158. Any persons desiring to speak in reference to said matter will now be heard.
There were no speakers that sent in comments for 158.
If there are no speakers, that hearing is closed.
Pursuant to law, public hearing will now be had on the following matter. Local improvement ordinance establishing the operating and maintenance cost of neighborhood commercial and residential parking areas. Introductory number 159. Any persons desiring to speak in reference to said matter will now be heard.
No comments were sent in for introductory number 159.
That hearing is closed.
Pursuant to law, public hearing will now be had on the following matter. Amending the Consolidated Community Development Plan 2019-20 Annual Action Plan to fund and implement programs to prevent, prepare for, and respond to difficulties arising out of the coronavirus pandemic. Introductory number 177. Any persons desiring to speak in reference to said matter will now be heard.
We received 22 comments on this item, and I hope you enjoy my reading voice. So the first comment we had was from Silvano Orsi. Thank you for the kind email and CV info. I am the president of Rochester's Little Italy Historic District, an official city neighborhood. Please see here, www.cityofrochester.gov/NWNSC. We are comprised of Rochester's most impoverished neighborhoods that suffer from serious crime issues, where 1 in every 2 children lives below the poverty line. We would like to request that CDBG funds be allocated to revitalization projects in the Lyle Avenue corridor, where the historic district is located, please. This area needs a community charrette in order to properly plan its revitalization. Daisy Elgarin, Director of NSC at City of Rochester, is fully aware of what is required in the area, like public realm improvements and new street signage, new trash receptacles, historic markers, and other cleanup and beautification items, etc., that could utilize CDBG funding. Please feel free to reach out to her and Commissioner Kirkmeyer, her boss, who also has been made aware of the area's urgent needs. Our website, www.littleitalyrock.com, or Facebook page at Little Italy Rock, has nearly 10,000 followers. The second comment was sent in from Norma Torres. The comment is free rent. The third comment was sent in by Thomas Beeman Sr. Persons with disabilities cannot afford masks. Some of the money should be earmarked for people with disability that need masks and cannot afford them. Much like myself, I get paid once a month and am broke within 5 days after paying my bills, and I can't afford the expensive mask. The fourth comment was sent in by Jerry Arnaud Machado. I read on the NBN newsletter about the Community Development Block Grant. It stated $4,881,038 was going to this fund. Can you tell me what this money will be used for and spent on? I am not understanding why so much money was allowed for this. So would like any info about it that you could explain to me. Thank you for your time and stay safe. This morning on Channel 10's website, they had a list of things that these funds may be used for. And I could not see where any one of them benefited the low-income housing needs. None of them made much sense to me for the reason that all of this big amount of money should be used for. If it is for low-income housing, then that is where it should go. So people that all of this will be reevaluated and not so much of the money going to help staff. Thank you for your time. The fifth comment was sent in by Franklin H. Orienter. And this one may need a timer, Katie. If the city wishes to distribute hazardous pay bonuses, senior staff should prepare criteria that are objective and measurable and document each case's justification for the bonus. Only performing duties that are identified in a position description is insufficient justification simply because there is a pandemic. If there is a specific increase in risk, such as spending more time with sick people or working physically closer to them, then the bonus might be justified. I'm opposed to blanket bonuses. For the category of small business emergency retention grants, what criteria will be used? Is it first come, first served? Will the process be based on applications reviewed by staff and evaluated? Should there be a cap for any one business? Should the company be vital to maintaining the area or the fabric of the community once the pandemic passes? Should similar firms in a given geographic area all be funded? Should funding be based on how many employees will be retained after the pandemic passes? Will a financial assessment be done to ensure that the emergency funding will keep the businesses viable for several months? For example, if the company is on the verge of bankruptcy, should they be funded? I believe that the assistance for food establishments should be increased. Priority should be given to businesses that remain open for takeout during the pandemic. Is it possible to provide more funding for FoodLink and other community-based food banks? Housing. Why is money needed, specifically $900,000 for eviction prevention when the governor has mandated that during the pandemic, no evictions can take place? Same for legal assistance. Is the $60,000 for the Housing Council funding for a new or existing staff position? If there are measurable increase in people needing assistance because of the pandemic. Aging in place should have a significant increase in funding and include people with disabilities. For example, require portable oxygen. Who would be at a higher risk by going out to get food? Foreclosure prevention. The amount should be reduced in that the governor has mandated that no foreclosures take place during the pandemic. And I'm not sure how many homeowners there are in this category. Homeowners in dire financial straits may need help filling applications for bank forbearance, may also need counseling or general fiscal management to ensure that they can pay the mortgage when the pandemic is over. I have to ask if the Empire Justice Center is going to hire new people or pay staff overtime with the funds provided. Landlord Rehab Grant Program. Is this a loan or matching funds program? How will this work? First come, first serve, or will the staff perform assessments to see where the units are located and how bad a shape they are in? Will the landlords be evaluated for current violations or complaints? Can a landlord apply for multiple
Time is up.
And I'll finish that sentence. Is there a goal for how many units and how quickly they will be made available? The additional comments have been shared with the council members in advance of this meeting. The sixth comment comes from Bernardo Garcia. I am writing to provide input as to how the CARES funding should be allocated. I know several RHA employees who are on the front lines each day as they head into the local office. In talking with them, I understand that it may not be logistically possible to have them work from home. And what should occur is some form of hazard pay to boost morale and give recognition to those who are heading in each and every day to work despite the risks that entails. Many of these employees have young children or elderly parents that they live with that they can potentially expose to something. If these funds are to be used on staffing, this is how I believe it should happen. The 7th comment is from Adrian Martin. Please use some of the HUD funding to place concrete barriers to protect bike lanes from drivers and to limit some residential streets to local car traffic only. Some people can get to work without crowding to buses and also have space to bike with their families. The canal and river paths are super crowded and it's hard for kids who aren't confident on their bikes. And we've been telling them to keep space from strangers, and there's no way to do that on the bike paths. Number 8, Dan Lill. Suggested use for grant for the most vulnerable. Background: I am the director of our community bikes on Hudson Avenue. And one of the things we struggle with is keeping our clientele informed as to what is happening at our shop. And we also realize that this is true for other information as well. This has been reinforced during the epidemic. Most of our clients now have at least a basic phone, but do not always have access to a data plan. Suggestion: mobile hotspots where information can be shared with anyone who has a phone. In addition, public information could be shared on billboards, much like traffic messages are shared now. Thanks for the opportunity to share. Stay well, and remember WYHs. Number 9, Philip Cezal. The plans for the old Cadillac Hotel have fallen through, and with the current climate, it could potentially be purchased at a distressed price and renovated to be used for any type of housing your department would see fit. Number 10, Rebecca Porter. Hello, citywide Wi-Fi and electricity to help bridge the digital divide. Working as part of an organization serving thousands of students and family members, inequity is exacerbated by lack of access to remote learning, online resources, email, etc. Also, families go without electricity for weeks at a time. While we can work together to get devices into students' hands, it's very difficult to ensure that students have high quality Wi-Fi access or electricity, and community grant funders will not pay for hotspots and monthly fees. Thank you. Number 11, Rich C. Johnson. Monday, my wife and I were seeing the majority of homeless without face masks, seeing 10 in total from Greece to downtown. Still panhandling made us think about others throughout the city. I would like to see supplies go out to them, as well as prevention from eviction for those who might become homeless or are homeless because they are waiting for housing. I also want to take the time to ask if some of the funding can be used to provide bathroom and shower facilities for the homeless living on Industrial Street in Peace Village. After our organization, Young and Gifted Incorporated, donated a month's supply of water for washing up and drinking, food for the day, and storage for food over last summer, we saw the conditions there. Until a more permanent place of residence can be established, I have been having conversations with elected officials for a solution to no rectification. Maybe this is a good time to look at this matter so they can keep up their hygiene and for their part to stop COVID from spreading. I know other organizations have done things with better shelters, and if this matter is taken care of already, I thank you. Number 12 is Inez Burns Nixon. I have 2 suggestions. The money should be used to help with community gardens. The garden feeds 1,000 or thousands of families every day. We get no financial backing or financial support from the city. Through also beautify all the communities and make the areas look nice. Community gardens bring families together, kids together, and communities together. A beautiful city makes a beautiful community. With winters being so rough in Rochester, I would love to feed, get help for homeless people, kids, tutoring after school programs. Winter months don't allow unless you have a building. Second, our community needs block clubs. The money would help with organizing, providing block clubs the support they need. The Net office doesn't do that, no help. We need our offices open back up. CONEA, Northeast, BCA need back open. That's how you help homeless, get them resources they need. These are the things Community Place and other agencies don't do. You have to build up your community to help with poverty. Sincerely, Inez Burns Nixon. Number 13, Rebecca Fuss. I am writing to comment on the city's use of $7.5 million HUD emergency funding to address the COVID crisis in the areas of closing the digital divide, housing services, support services for the homeless or at risk for homelessness, and economic development. I urge the city of Rochester to designate HUD funding for the Rochester Public Library. The library is a community leader in finding solutions for each of these issues. Closing the digital divide. Before the library had to close, it loaned out mobile internet units to hundreds of patrons who did not have internet at home. The library plans to continue this service upon reopening because of the great impact on households. As a result, adults and children can continue their connection to loved ones, work, and school. Housing services, support services for homeless or at risk for homelessness. The library's Safe to Be Smart after school program is remotely keeping in touch with youth, many of whom are homeless or housing insecure. Although in-person programming is not possible at this time, staff have developed trusted relationships with youth over time. As a result, youth will tell the staff if they are okay or if they need help with food, housing, and or education, and staff can offer referrals and support. Economic development. Central Library's Business Insights Center conducts market research and patent and trademark information for local businesses and entrepreneurs. Specialized librarians provide these services by individual appointment and can do so remotely. As a result, entrepreneurs have realized their dreams, own their own business, and build wealth. The Rochester Public Library is, as their slogan says, more than you think, and the public realizes this. Just yesterday, 66 individuals on Giving Tuesday supported mobile devices and librarian live chat service. Clearly, they see the impact that the library services have on the community. I urge you to do the same. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to express my opinion. This next one is from Mary Coffey, number 14. The North Winton Village Board would like to comment on the amendment to the 2019-20 Consolidated Community Development Annual Action Plan. In response to the above, we would like to say that we have some very good housing developments and developers in Rochester, along with many good nonprofits and neighborhood groups. Some have gained monetarily by receiving government monies, grants, and or given tax advantages for their work. However, we feel there should be accountability to the taxpayers for those who retire or who receive these privileges. They must make sure their properties are continually maintained, lead-free, and updated. They must make sure that properties that receive or have received government monies are safe at all times. They must have well-staffed security, and they must work hand in hand with law enforcement. Communities or neighborhoods that receive money must also work to make sure their communities are safe. Landlords in already existing neighborhoods who receive government monies in any form, such as grants and or rent, must make sure that housing is brought up to standards and all code must be in compliance. The properties must also be safe and lead-free. There must be good supportive housing for those with special needs, housing opportunities for persons with AIDS, HOPWA programs, and are homeless. Our nonprofits who also receive government monies must also be held accountable, as well as neighborhood groups. The multifamily housing developments and public housing authorities must use the move-in, move-out forms for their tenants and not receive public monies if they don't. All of the above should be contractual when a developer, landlord, nonprofit, or neighborhood group receives government monies. And if the contract is broken, they must pay back the money or tax advantages that they received. Number 2, although we have many good developers, landlords, nonprofits, and neighborhood groups, we have a problem. Rochester came in dead last in a ranking of 53 of the country's city job markets published by the Wall Street Journal. Our children are not getting a good education. Some of our communities which receive monies have high crime rates, gangs, and drug activity. Our poverty rate in Rochester has not gone down, but has gone up. And with all the government monies brought in to help our citizens, it has not changed their quality of life. We have also had scandals involving a developer, our housing authority, and nonprofits, including the unlawful spending of monies by nonprofits. Due to the failure of our school district, the State Education Commissioner is appointing a fiscal and academic monitor for the district for a term of 3 years. We recommend that the federal government and state government monitor the spending of taxpayer money in Rochester. It is time that our citizens in need have an equal chance to get a good job, stay in a safe neighborhood, have a good quality of life, and become self-sufficient. The remainder of Mary Coffey's comments have been shared with the council. The next item comes from William McDonald. It is number 15. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the revisions to the city's action plan on the use of federal CARES Act funding to address the impact of the pandemic in our community. I am writing as an older adult resident of the city of Rochester and one who is currently involved with the Rochester-Monroe County Aging Alliance. I am not providing these comments on behalf of the Aging Alliance or of any other organization, but my comments do reflect my experience in the social services sector for 40+ years. They solely represent my views, although I do know my concern about older adult isolation during this pandemic is shared by many national and local thought leaders, including AARP, the National Academies, and the Aging Alliance membership. I support the plan's proposal to direct support for economic development, housing, homelessness prevention, and the many other uses described in the plan. However, I do want to raise the need for further attention to older adults in the city, particularly to address social isolation, specifically those older adults living in poverty. The Center for an Urban Future published a report in 2019 that noted that the city of Rochester experienced a 36% increase in its adult population, and that Rochester's older adults have the highest poverty rate of any city in our county, in the state at 31%. The increase in the number of older adults in poverty in our city has increased at an alarming rate. The combination of poverty and social isolation resulting from the digital divide should be a concern for all of us in the city of Rochester. Experts in the field of aging, such as the National Academies, have also identified social isolation as a clear public health hazard, resulting in premature death rates equal to smoking and obesity. During this pandemic, many residents rely on technology to reduce isolation. Technology allows older adults to connect with family, friends, and healthcare providers. I encourage the city to extend this lifeline to our community's older adult population who do not have the means to link up. The CARES Act plan allocates a very modest sum of $20,000 to Aging in Place for food deliveries through Lifespan. I certainly applaud that action, but I believe more support should be directed to our older adult population that comprise 12% of our population. Undoubtedly, there is an equity issue regarding access to technology by city residents, and although this fact is being addressed in the plan, it is seemingly for children only. I encourage the city to also explicitly consider older adults in this equation. Specifically, I urge the city to add technology solutions as an additional strategy to Aging in Place. Social service agencies such as Catholic Family Center, Jewish Family Services, and Lifespan, to name a few, can readily identify low-income older adults who could benefit from obtaining technology to engage in virtual meetings, support groups, and the like. The rest of Mr. McDonald's comments have been shared with the council. The 16th comment comes from H. Peitos. I would like to see the money spent on the homeless. We need to take responsibility for sheltering and feeding these people. Hunger is a major problem in Rochester, not just for the homeless, but especially now with unemployment. We saw the issue of hunger when the schools closed. Hunger and homelessness are tremendous problems. These affect both young and older citizens. FoodLink and House of Mercy do such wonderful things for our city. The next comment, number 17, comes from Janet Thurlby. His Branches is a federally qualified community health center. We have 2 locations, one in the 19th Ward and the other in the Beechwood neighborhood. For over 40 years, we have been serving those in our community who are in the safety net. Many of our patients are homeless or in unstable housing situations, and many are uninsured. We serve all who enter our doors, regardless of ability to pay. We would like to see some additional funding directed to the federally qualified community health centers in our community who are on the front lines of this pandemic. Each of the health centers may have different needs, such as funds for COVID testing and treatment for those at risk, or personal protective equipment that is so expensive and difficult to obtain. His Branches would be pleased to work with other FQHCs and the City of Rochester to identify ways that we could support this effort. The 18th comment comes from Sarah Fletcher. I would like to submit the following comment on the city's amended 2019-2020 annual action plan in regards to the funds the city is receiving from the CARES Act. It is critical that COVID relief funds support employment opportunities for our most vulnerable community members, including people coming home from incarceration. Justice-involved individuals suffer from higher rates of unemployment that are higher than the City of Rochester average under normal circumstances. This is all heightened during these unprecedented times. CEO's program has been deemed essential during the COVID-19 pandemic. During this crisis, we have been doing everything we can to maintain core services. Many weeks into the COVID-19 pandemic, CEO is fully engaged in the emergency relief efforts to support formerly incarcerated job seekers. We have already converted all vocational services and central staff to a work from home configuration, in which staff engage participants remotely. For transitional work crews that can stay open, we have instituted protocols to safely operate teams using guidance from the CDC and other public health authorities. We continue to offer remote paid training options and coaching sessions for participants, even those who cannot attend crews, to maintain engagement. Across the city, our priority remains channeling resources to formerly incarcerated residents who allow them to put food on the table, find upward mobility, and avoid ending up back in the criminal justice system. COVID federal relief resources are critical to helping us do so. CDBG funding can be used to provide transitional jobs and vocational services to people returning home from incarceration and who are dislocated from work during COVID-19. An expanded crew operation in Rochester supported by CDBG funds would allow CEO to partner with Rochester employers to directly provide pandemic-related response needs. Funding is also needed to support our communities through the long-term impacts of COVID. We anticipate an increased demand for community partners as a result of job loss and compassionate prison releases. Employment being a key risk factor for recidivism, we want to prioritize public safety and successfully link individuals to the workforce. Please reach out if there is anything else we need to do. Thank you for your assistance. Our 19th comment comes from Colleen McCarthy. Regarding all activities recommended by the City of Rochester for CARES Act funding when allocating funding recommended for identified populations, such as the elderly, homeless, or persons with AIDS, include identified populations percentage of city's total population as a funding determinant. For example, despite the city's population loss, there are over 8,000 more city seniors now than there were 10 years ago. Out of an overall population of 206,284 people, there are 34,000 city residents aged 60 or older. Regarding economic development, proposed $300,000 assistance for food establishments Could food establishments be incentivized to have staff complete COVID testing before the benefit of public health, or for the benefit of public health and for the benefit of the food establishment? Regarding housing, landlord rehab grant program. Can preference be given to lower income landlord property owners? Thank you for your consideration of these comments. Please know, citizens of Rochester, thank you for your service, especially during this pandemic. The 20th comment comes from Bridget Hurley, the Children's Agenda's comments on the City of Rochester's amended 2019-2020 annual action plan. The Children's Agenda appreciates the opportunity to comment on the city's amended annual action plan. We commend the city for choosing to focus CDBG funds on housing issues, the digital divide, economic development, and emergency services related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Our comments today particularly address the digital divide and economic development and their impact on youth and children. Digital divide. Among the realities exposed by the coronavirus pandemic are the disparities that exist in Rochester residents' access to Wi-Fi and appropriate devices. As a result, children are being denied educational services, speech and other therapies, social emotional supports, and arts, literary and music experiences. FCC data indicate that all blocks in Rochester have necessary digital infrastructure for both residential broadband and wireless communication. According to the US Census, the majority of city residents, 88%, have some type of computer, smartphone, or wireless device, and 80% have some type of internet subscription. However, 17% of residents rely solely on cellular data plan. Smartphones have limited functionality for educational purposes. Therefore, 37% of residents have limited online functionality. There are geographic disparities in internet access, with some neighborhoods having 20% to 40% of residents with internet access and others having 80+%. Most Rochester neighborhoods are in the 60% to 80% range, as has been noted by the Rochester Black Agenda Group. The pandemic has had significant impacts on education that are exacerbated by disparities in access to online learning. Specifically, the city should streamline permitting process to remove barriers to newer, smaller internet providers, create and implement plan to increase access to high-speed internet in vulnerable and middle neighborhoods. Rochester 2034. Early childhood workforce supports. Because one objective of the Community Development Block Grant Program is to develop viable urban communities through loans and grants to small businesses, the Children's Agenda suggests that the city consider recommendations we previously made with regard to supporting a critical economic sector, the early childhood care industry. These small businesses accomplish multi-purposes when available, allowing parents to work knowing that their child is safe, care that provides developmentally appropriate activities to help young children succeed in school and life, and tax revenue as city businesses. With childcare workers at the bottom of the wage scale, a shortage of slots for infant toddler childcare in Rochester, the sector may collapse with the added stress of the COVID-19 emergency. Our second to last comment comes from Jessica Wilson on behalf of Andrea DeMeo and Bill Valenti from Trillium Health. COVID-19 testing is essential to community well-being in the COVID-19 era. The virus is expected to recur in fall 2020 during the seasonal influenza or flu period. Trillium Health's proposed COVID-19 mitigation program is designed to manage the resurgence of COVID-19 in Rochester, New York in 2020 and 2021. Within vulnerable populations, avoid another period of community quarantine and maintain normal community and business operations. Trillium Health's CMP minimizes the disruption of a dual epidemic of COVID-19 and flu by preventing the managing COVID-19 and influenza in vulnerable populations. The end result is stabilizing economic activity, maintaining safety, improving the daily lives of vulnerable Rochesterians, avoiding hospitalizations, and maintaining the overall community health. Trillium Health's CMP will conduct community-based activities by employing community healthcare workers who will be mobilized to perform COVID-19 testing and administer influenza vaccines in at-risk neighborhoods, community centers, and residential programs. Targeted priority populations within these settings include homeless and at risk of homelessness communities, people living with HIV, members of the LGBTQ community, and communities of color. For background, Governor Cuomo implemented the New York on Pause initiative in response to COVID-19 pandemic on March 22nd, 2020. Since then, physical and social distancing and closures of schools and certain businesses have contributed to flattening the curve with a reduction in new infections, hospitalizations, and intensive care unit admissions. Jurisdictions are leading their own reopening efforts. The timing and pacing of reopening are critical to avoid the resurgence of COVID-19 in the near term. The US Centers for Disease Control, CDC, and other health experts predict, based on known patterns of spread of other respiratory viruses, that COVID will become a seasonal infection. This seasonal pattern is expected to occur at the same time as annual seasonal influenza, projected in October 2020 through April 2021. Others expect a 2-year cycle through 2022, depending on vaccine development. While COVID-19 is decreasing in prevalence, it will not be eradicated completely. Instead, respiratory virus experts predict that even with flattening the curve, COVID-19 infections will continue to be seen in small clusters among vulnerable populations. Most vulnerable are people who are homeless and at risk of becoming homeless, communities of color, people living with HIV, members of the LGBTQ community, transgender people, and people whose living situation does not allow for adequate social distancing.
Time is up.
The rest of Trillium Health's comments have been shared with council. Our final comment today comes from Angela Rollins from RMAPI. COPE period concerns managing the crisis itself. 1, direct income support during the crisis. In quotes, I've applied to unemployment and it's been pushing on 5 weeks and I still haven't received notice in my situation. I've got my stimulus today. Until today, I didn't have anything at all. There are significant loss of income and much needed unemployment and stimulus payments have been delayed for many. When asked how they were planning to use their stimulus checks, many said to catch up on overdue bills and pay for meals. Less than 10% expect to save any of their stimulus payment. Essential workers have felt unsafe and have asked for hazard pay to compensate their daily risks. The second point, access the basic needs during this crisis. With the quotation, I can't afford rent and basic needs for my family. Accessing basic needs has been a major challenge during the pandemic, including 1, food concerns. There are concerns that food pantries and distribution sites such as the rec center are unsafe. Community members have consistently asked for resources on grocery deliveries or being able to receive a week's worth of meals rather than exposing themselves daily to COVID-19. Other household essentials. Cost of essentials such as cleaning supplies have increased, causing major financial burdens. Number 3, transportation. Concerns that public transportation risks exposure to COVID-19 and desire to find resources for ride sharing. Number 4, childcare, desire for additional household support for homeschooling and mental health for children. Number 5, healthcare. 25% of our survey respondents listed healthcare and prescriptions as difficult to get right now. Number 6, housing. Concerns about illegal evictions with landlords locking tenants out. More widely paying rent or mortgages has been the bill most are worried about. The recovery period concerns, managing recovery from the crisis, future income concerns. You can never go to public assistance to get a car note paid, but people are going to need that when they get back to work. Number 1, there has been an interest in saving incentives and support for uncertain financial futures. Number 2, there has been a desire to expand income supports in recovery period, including public assistance, SNAP, disability, etc. Affordability of basic needs in the future. I think people are going to need responsible or reasonable grace periods to pay for these bills that were deferred. It can't be the bills are due the next month. We're going to need more time. Number one. The rest of the comment was submitted to the council in advance, and that concludes the comments that were shared on introductory number 177.
Thank you. So that does conclude the speakers on that item. And that concludes our public hearings for this month. Thank you for those that offered comments. This legislation will be voted on Tuesday at our next council meeting, May 12th, and will be streamed live on YouTube and Facebook. You can see more information at our website on www.cityofrochester.gov/public meetings. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.
Good evening, all.